Right, we've got a panel here on world building. We have some fantastic world builders from a variety of different backgrounds. I'm going to let them introduce themselves to you. We're going to start off with Kayt. Kayt, can you tell us about yourself? What do you do? And give us one world building commandment. Thou shalt not.
Okay, I'm Kayt, otherwise known as It's a Map. So I make maps, obviously, for D&D and other TTRPGs. I would say don't make a very clean map, because who lives in a house that's really clean? And my commandment would be put shit everywhere, pardon my French, but just put stuff in random places, because I always find that's kind of funny, because the DM doesn't always notice it if you've made it for them, but a character will always notice and go, what's this? And their DM is like, it's so yeah, I like adding in little quirky stuff that can add to the story. Fantastic. Unintentionally.
That's super. Thank you very much, Kayt. Next on our panel, we have Neil. Neil is a TTRPG creator. Neil, tell us a bit about yourself.
So I'm Neil. My day job, I'm a secondary school teacher teaching science and hard sums. And but my passion is, one of my passions is TTRPG design. I've wrote a few different games now, but my big magnus opus I've been working on for the last 7 years is a game called Fey Earth, which I'm Kickstarter in March, and it's a alternate 19th century Earth where all the creatures from folklore and fairy tale are real and have always been real, and it belongs to humanity. So it's a game that's heavily based on hundreds, if not thousands, of hours of researching academic texts on folklore to try and make a world that is as accurate and faithful to the original folklore that my stories are coming from. And in terms of my commandment, I suppose for me it would be, thou shalt not try to write something about every single little thing in your world. You do not have to. You can leave stuff blank and leave space for your own sanity and also to give your GMs freedom in their game that they're running in your world.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Neil. Next on our panel, we have David. David is an author. David, tell us a bit about yourself and what's your commandment?
I'm a fantasy author. I write epic fantasy, urban fantasy, and cozy fantasy. I live in Athenry, so I'm quite local. Not as local as I was last year. That was even more local. I didn't have to travel far. I'm a full-time writer, just love creating worlds, love creating characters. I play tabletop gaming as well. So my commandment, coming more from a writing of like stories, I suppose, kind of direction is, thou shalt not make it seem that when you open the first page of a book that the world the story is in has just sprang into existence on that first page. Like, it needs to feel like it's a living, breathing world, that the story just happens to be taking place, and in that specific time there needs to be something before it, something after it, and other stories going on at the same time, so it's more grounded and believable. So that'd be my one.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, David. And next up, and finally but not least on the panel, we have TTBG or royalty. Lawrence. Lawrence, could you tell us a bit about yourself and give us a...
I'm more of the jester at the court, really.
At least you're a member of the court.
Yes, I'm Lawrence Schick. I'm a writer and long-time RPG designer. I've been designing RPG worlds about as long as they have existed. I'll just mention 3 that I've worked in. The original fantasy world that my friend Tom Moldvay and I co-created back in the mid-1970s was the second fantasy world adopted by TSR for D&D for the expert set in 1981, when Gary didn't want that game set in World of Greyhawk. That was his world, goddammit. So we had to go with a different world, so we used the world that we had designed pre-professionally. And that was what became known as the known world, and eventually Mystara, and then has now faded into the mist of time. I spent over 9 years in Tamriel, working on the Elder Scrolls Online, and I just spent 3 years in the Forgotten Realms, working on Baldur's Gate 3. So my commandment is that thou shalt have thy setting reflect the genre of the game that you're playing. Your players are going to have expectations about what kind of fun they're going to have because they're playing a fantasy game or a horror game or a space adventure or post-apocalyptic or whatever, and your setting needs to pay off on those expectations and then subvert them. That's my commandment. Pay off first, though.
That's a fantastic point where genre and world building sort of have to tie in together. And I wonder if maybe our author beside you might have some thoughts to explore on that, how sort of your genre and your world sort of intermix.
Yeah, so it's the expectation of the reader as well is really, really important. You as Lawrence says, you want to subvert things when you can, but you don't want to invite someone into an epic fantasy world and then have it very kind of like folklore based, for example, and you lose the scope of epic, which is what epic readers want. I know you can bring in. I'm a big fan of mashing genre together and bringing different elements in of things. I think it's fun. I think it's interesting, but there's a line where you might go too far and lose that kind of core fan, I suppose, of what that thing that you are trying to create is. So I have like an urban fantasy series which I would treat very, very differently in how I go about kind of constructing the world to my epic fantasy one, because there's a completely different expectation from the readers. But as me as a writer, it's a different tone as well, and there is certain genres that obviously will have completely varying different tones, and some of those ones will kind of match a little bit. Urban fantasy is you can bring quite a lot of horror into urban fantasy, and you can bring quite a lot of horror into dark fantasy and some epic fantasy, but you wouldn't really bring horror into cozy fantasy because you would that core of people that there for a nice relaxing time where there's not going to be very much peril will be like, why are people getting decapitated? And why is this happening? And you'll lose them pretty much straight away. So it's very, very important to. Yeah, I'm a big believer of kind of pushing the envelope a little bit and kind of surprising people and subverting some things, but you don't want to stray too far away from the expectations of the people going in there.
You have something to say on that, Neil?
No, I was just going to say, I think it also, going back onto the gaming side of things, it's really important that the genre and the system match.
Sure.
I think that's, you see this an awful lot where people are they're playing in one system and they've only ever played in one system, and they're like, oh, I want to do this thing now, space opera. But you're playing in a game that's pseudo-medieval, epic high fantasy. And it's like, we're going to just mash the rules up, and it's like, there's a space opera game right there with the system and mechanics designed for exactly what you're doing, You don't need to take this system that is designed for this genre and beat it until it does not in any way resemble what it was for this. Just learn some new rules, and it's not that hard, it really isn't. And I do think it is an important thing, and when you don't do it, it can lead to an awful lot of dissatisfaction because the players are like, we want to do this thing and we're going to play it in this style, in this genre, but you're not using the right tools for the job of what you're trying to do. And it's why you should be trying to make sure that when you pick a genre that you do match the system, because most of us when we're designing these games, there are open systems, obviously, your GURPS and stuff like that can in theory work on anything, but that's nearly a genre of itself, that kind of open system. For most of us, it's when you start working on a system, you're working on it with the idea of the world that will be played in that system. Or if you start working on a world, you've already picked the system you're going to use for that. So, there's a reason we put those two together. And I think it's if you don't, I'm not saying you can have lots of fun, but, think about what you're doing before you do it. Why are we if we're going to play this game, let's make sure that we're playing it with the tools that work for this game.
Is that something you consider, Kate, when you're doing? So obviously you work a lot in the visuals of the world. Does like the whether it's going to be a horror story or a cozy fantasy, does that factor into how you're putting together the visuals?
Definitely, because I wouldn't put the kind of more scary stuff now I haven't got to do a lot of cozy stuff because people seem to like the more gory stuff. Yeah, and like I would always kind of try to make it, especially in the gory, like they're kind of my favorite. Swamp maps are actually my favorite, but gory swamp maps. But just adding in something that will actually make people go, what? That, when it's a gory kind of game.
I unsettle them a little bit.
A little bit and go, what? Why did she do that? Why have I seen that? That's weird. I would like to do some more cozy maps now that I know. I didn't even really know that was a thing until this weekend, and I was talking to people about it. But like I can't remember my name. The space D&D.
Spelljammer?
Thank you. I'm really looking forward to make maps for that because Incarnate is what I use, and they don't have anything for doing that right now. So like you try to make a spaceship, but it looks more like a tavern spaceship shaped.
That works for Spelljammer. That's pretty on brand for Spelljammer.
Yeah. But they are releasing more stuff that will be able to do, and I'm really excited about being able to do that. But yeah, I think just kind of remembering what you're doing it for. Like if it is like a spooky mansion I had to make, but it couldn't all be spooky. So normal rooms, and then they go into this room, and all of a sudden there's like, why is there all green stuff in the bath, and why is there dirty stuff around? Just kind of,
Juxtaposition.
Yeah, just kind of make up. There's something not quite right here, So yeah.
Super duper. Cool. So moving on from that, I wonder. That's sort of, I had a link and I've lost it now. But I was thinking. Sort of about tropes. I was sort of making me think about tropes versus originality. And if you're building a world, there's sort of a seesaw there to be weighed up. I see, David, you're nodding your head, and that's a dangerous thing to do. Do you want to tell us a bit about tropes versus originality?
I'm a very active listener. I'm sorry, I should say it's
dangerous thing.
Yeah, I like tropes. And I think the reason, but there's some tropes that I don't like. Let's say this is a bad start. I like tropes, but I also don't like them at the same time. There is some that I would love to just throw in the bin and never ever have them return.
Have to ask what ones.
Phrygian characters, I think, is just one of the worst tropes, and it's crazy that it still happens a lot in like this day and age that like Phrygian is still a main driver in so many different stories. There's more original ways of getting someone to do something than killing off their wife or boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever it is.
The dog and the case of John Wick.
Don't touch the dog.
Don't touch
is that
the dog,
not original? It's a bit of a twist.
But like I like a lot of tropes, and I think the reason they become tropes is because they are. That people like them and people go back to them, and there's a comfort of a trope, and what I really like is subverting tropes as well. So you bring it in, and I have in one of my series I have like a chosen one trope where it's kind of built up where you think a character's going to be the chosen one, but then he gets killed, and that's the end of it. And you're like, oh well, and there's like and it's one of those things where it's you build it up and you play on it, and it's a really good storytelling technique to kind of play on people's expectations that way and kind of just twist it and give them something a little bit new. But there's some genres that are like absolutely just based on tropes, and people this is not a slight or anything because it's such a popular genre, but romantasy at the moment is huge. And it is completely built on tropes, and people read it because of the tropes, because it's a comfort and they know what's going to happen. And it's more like you can kind of let the characters breathe a little bit more then, because there's that kind of side of it. And it's the same with gaming as well. Then when you sit down and play a game, when we go in with a group, you kind of know what to expect a little bit away. But if say you're sitting down for a new campaign and you've created new characters, you kind of know what's going to happen in the game to an extent. But it's the characters and the players that are the ones that are going to change it. And they're going to bring something new to the story, which is because there's that old adage, there's only so many stories, and it's the way that you tell them, and it's the way you execute them. So yeah, I don't really mind tropes on the whole.
Okay. I think about so many stories. I mean, Lawrence, you've been writing a long time. Is it this obviously something you would have put it up against?
Sure, and in the context of games, it's what I was saying about genre, right? A trope is expresses an expect. It's something player can expect, right? It goes along with the kind of story that they're looking to see because they expect to play this kind of genre. They have seen this kind of story played out in serial medium, in movies, in books, in comic books, and they want to be in there, and they want to do it themselves. And so, you look at the different tropes and you say, okay, some of these are really valuable in as far as player satisfaction. If you're going to do a Western, you're going to have a showdown in the street, and that's going to provide really interesting suspense, and players know what to expect, and you can have it pay off in a big way. But the thing about tropes also is that because your players know them, you can also count on them. You can give them the opportunity themselves to subvert the trope, right? Give them the chance to do it, and they'll look at it and go, "Do I really want to get up on the roof and shoot that guy in the back instead of have the showdown or something in this Western, or do I feel like I need to go and walk down the street at high noon?" Give the players the chance to make up their mind about whether they want to triumphantly inhabit this trope or maliciously subvert it. And either way, they're gonna get the satisfaction of player agency and of having made the decision about which thing is going to happen here, and you're going to still be expressing the genre and the kind of fun they were looking for. So that's how tropes are useful, because players already know them. So you set them up, and then you give them the option to follow through or take it down.
Fantastic. I see people looking at me. Did you have more to add, or
No,
move on to something else?
I do like I do at times heavily into my tropes because I'm lazy. And I don't have to come up with an original idea, But at the same time, there is that player comfort of they know what the tropes are, and the satisfaction of progressing through the trope as well. And then depending on the genre as well, as you were saying, like some genres have lots of tropes, like the romantasy. The other classic one, horror. Horror is so full of tropes. I mean, I was running a horror RPG there about a month ago, and the entire game, we just was like it was a slasher monster that they were fighting in an abandoned insane asylum. And they were idiot teenagers. Like it was.
Sounds pretty original.
There was nothing at all original about this, and we had the best fun ever, and it was absolutely amazing. And I was going heavy and hard with all of the tropes from my side of it, with the monster, with the villain. But what was really funny was like they were genuinely getting scared, and they were genuinely panicking, and then started making all the really terrible decisions that the characters make in the horror movies.
Go down to
That you as the viewer, like, why would you do that? That's so stupid. They were making those really stupid decisions because they were panicking, so they were becoming the trope themselves, and it was amazing. It was so much fun.
Are there tropes when we're creating maps and stuff? How do you feel about that?
I think there can be there's a kind of an idea of this is a tavern and this is where we start the game. I don't know how many games I've been in, but you always start in the tavern. But
It's a classic.
yeah, it is.
It works.
But it's nice when it's something completely different, like maybe the tavern has a pool in it, or maybe there's a festival going on, or like it's nice when somebody comes to you and go, I'm going to start this game, and they don't say tavern. It's like, ooh, okay, something different. This is really interesting.
I'm a big fan of blowing up the tavern.
Yes, and I'm a big fan. There's like these little paper cranes in Incarnate, and I love dumping them everywhere because it's like, but like not a whole lot of them, but like at the end of the bar there might be 3 of them because I really like the idea of, I'm that kind of player where I will look at a map and go, what's that? And go over and cause.
It's a nice piece of humanity that someone's sat at the bar doing
Yeah.
origami.
And there's a little bit of chaos involved in it as well. So I was like, yeah, I like that.
I suppose that feeds into very nicely my next question, which would be about sort of believability in the world, making it feel lived in. And that's not like just a curated space, but that it's a place people go.
Well, I like clutter. I like adding, especially if it's like, say, a wizard's house. There's going to be bits of books and bits of scrolls or whatever, and just not making it clean, making it look lived in, and making sure that the floor looks like people have actually walked in it.
So how do you make a town look like lived in? What makes a street look like a street that people are using?
Horseshit?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Does Incarnate have a little horseshit button?
There is actually a poop button, yes. And yeah, just adding like just icky stuff, and like that looks like green slime kind of thing, maybe a bit of moss, but just to try and not have it look clean. Because even when I look at the maps I made when I was first making maps, and I was like, I'm really proud of this. And when I look back, I go, oh my God, it's too clean. I need more stuff. Even in the taverns and stuff, there's nothing on the tables. There's nothing. Whereas now I'd be like, right, there's a bottle that's fallen on the floor, or there's a glass. So it's like making it, like I say, a real house. If you go into a house, there might be like a cat on the bed, because like that's where cats like to be, or on the roof, or just adding those little kind of human touches.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think it makes it more.
I might ask Lawrence, because I know you've made like places where it's a town full of bird people. How do you make a space like that feel real, believable, lived in?
Your best tool for believability in a world is the characters who live there. Your players are going to talk to them. Who are they? What are their lives like? If you know that, then you can convey the reality of the world through what matters to those people who live in it, right? And back to genre again, okay? The people who live in your world, they automatically are going to reflect what the players expect about the world, right? So they're going to be in genre, they're going to be the kind of people the players expect to meet. What makes your world distinct from other worlds in that same genre, what gives your world its individual reality and presence, those are the things that you have your players emphasize. The players, I'm sorry, have your characters emphasize. The players are going to take for granted, that you've got a fantasy world, or you've got a horror setup or something, and that you just don't need to explain that stuff. It's going to come along with it. What you need to explain is where it's different, and that is also what's going to make it more memorable. And the differences then are you want to have characters who personify the differences of your world and can convey that to the players. So you think in advance. Okay, what are the key things about my world that I want to get across, especially like at the first session, right? And then you're going to come up with NPCs who, one by one, personify those differences and are going to carry that across. And these are people that your players are going to meet. And something about them, and something about their place in that world, and their problems, and their worries, and their fears, and their loves, and their hates, that's what's going to convey and make that world seem solid. So use your characters.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you've got a world as well where there's a very stark contrast between like the real stuff and the now real stuff.
Yeah. My secret to making my world real is actually the mundane. It's the everyday. So you've made your world and it's different to whatever world. Okay, so in my example, my world is different because the Fey Earth exists and magic is real. So, well, how does that change everyday activities and the mundane in life? So one simple example I have is that all of the major cities, their streets are lit by magically enchanted globes. So as a result, the oceans are teeming with whales because they weren't being hunted for whale oil. You know? Because that's, in the 19th century, that's why they're being hunted, for whale oil to light the street lamps in European cities. So it's those little, it's a minor change that has this knock-on effect on something that would have nothing to do with the world. But you say that, and it's like, that makes so much sense. That's so logical and fits so well. It's like, it makes it seem realer now, because like, no, and that's how I get them to think and believe in it. It's like, it's not the crazy fantasy dragons and fairies and fairies. It's like, no, it's those mundane, everyday things that are now different. You're thinking, and you're immediately thinking, if I was living in that world, well, how would it be different for me now with these little changes, and how would my life be different? And it's like, it's such a, from a world building perspective, it's great. You think about all these tangents and stuff, but then when you're presenting it to the players, it's such a simple little trick that isn't flashy, and that's what really sucks them in then, is these simple little logical jumps based on the everyday life.
I always think it must be absolutely terrifying to be a normal, regular, non-magical person living in a fantasy world. You know, there's always that thing where it's like people that live in New York when the Avengers are around, and you're like, oh God.
Yeah.
You know, it's just
My
like
house.
That. It's like, oh, here's another dragon.
Yeah.
Here's another mage. Here's another thing.
So what you're saying with the whale, I mean, obviously that's a savage little nugget, and it's totally stolen. I'm taking that. That is in the pocket now. But it does make me wonder how when we're building worlds, how real world history, real world events, how much of that we're feeding back in. David, you're nodding. It's a dangerous thing to do.
Sorry.
Please take it away.
It's a funny thing is if you start talking to a lot of particularly fantasy authors, a lot of them have a background in history.
Yeah.
Up to university and stuff. I have a degree in history as well, and it's something that I think a lot of the enjoyment comes from, because when you are creating a world, is that you want to create this history as well. It's part of the enjoyment of it, and the knock-on effects of certain things that have happened, and so it's always useful to go back and look at real world history and kind of see how, you know, various kind of things that have happened, like battles or droughts or you know, natural disasters and everything like that, or just the general ticking of time has affected other parts of the world, and has this knock-on effect. Because when you are creating that world, it's like like I said at the start of it, like I really like it when people set various stories in the same world. If you've built a world, I always see, well, why just tell one story in it? You've built this breathing world. Why not just go somewhere else and tell another story, and what was happening here and what was happening there? But make sure that the story you've told, that it's not just in isolation, have that knock-on effect on a wider, even if it's like a little Easter egg or a little nugget or you know, the Dragon Age video games are really good for that, where it's like, you know, they're all set in different regions of the world, but then you'll hear like a little story of something that you did in the previous game that's affected something else, like that has this rolling effect. And that's what happens in history as well. You'll look at something that happened in China in the medieval times that affected Western Europe because of the Silk Road, and you know, you kind of look at it and go, okay, well, I have this event here that's in my world. How is that going to affect this city that's on the coast all the way over here? And say this is a trader city that you have that the rest of the world relies on this, and there's some kind of disaster here. How is that going to affect everyone in there? So and you can find that basis in history, and what's a really interesting thing as well, the amount of really famous authors like Robert Jordan would be a good example, who's famous for battles in their series, and their battles are actually just real battles that happened in history, and he's just kind of just changed the map slightly. So like the last battle in the Wheel
Game of Thrones.
Yeah. So the last battle in the Wheel of Time series is Napoleon's battle against the Russians, but he's basically just turned the map. So it's like, instead of north is north, it's west, and it's the exact same tactics. All the armies are in the same positions, and it's just it's exactly the same. but it's like there's magic.
It's going in the pocket as well.
Magic instead of muskets.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, that's a great phrase. That's a tagline for
Going out
it.
of ours now.
Kayt, when you, real world history, do you feed that into your map designs?
Not so much, but when I do world maps or like a continent map or something, and I get that a lot of it is going to be magical and stuff, but I still would kind of like to try and stick to the, like, you know, rivers run down from the mountains and
That's such a thing people mess up, where you just have the random river in the middle of a map somewhere.
and it's straight. And it's like, that's not what happens. So
Where's your Oxbow Lake?
there has to be some of this happening. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that kind of talking to whoever said, can you do this? And you go, okay, but we just maybe need to change a couple of things, and even just like not having just a coastline. There's going to be little bits of rock, as if anybody's ever been to the West Island, like there's going to be little bits of rock, and you could do something with them. You could put, I don't know, a crazy prison out there or whatever. But it's just remembering to kind of, obviously it's not.
That's more real world geology.
Yeah, add some of the real, to make it feel more real. You can then also have like the floating mountains and stuff, but like just to kind of have, you know, anchor it in some sort of actual way geography works, and then add in the little bit of spice.
Absolutely. I feel, Neil, you could either talk on this for an hour, or it's totally redundant to ask you.
It's one or the other. But no, I was just going to say, like some of the craziest things that have happened in history are stuff that if somebody wrote in a book, people would say, that is stupid. That would never happen. That is so ridiculous. Like, I mean, the great example is the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand.
It's great.
Like, it reads like a Monty Python sketch.
Yeah.
You know, like it actually does. He goes to assassinate him and he messes it up, and then he comes off, and then he randomly bumps into him like an hour later around in a different cafe. It's like
he's having a coffee outside.
Yeah, and it's like, are you serious? And it's like, but it's great. And it's like, you know, you can use those events in history and completely, like Jordan does, steal it and put it into your own book. And it's like. And if you said that, and they're just like, no, I base it off this historical event that happened here. So that's that is what that I love of like you can take these what sound like ridiculous things that actually did happen, but then you get the knock-on effect of it. Like using that example, we had a European war as a result of this one person being killed because of who they were, you know. And you can just have so much fun then with that of like I'll have this event here, and then just how the domino fall. You can like write an entire history that could span an entire continent.
Little hurricane moths.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's so much fun to do that. And it kind of go back to what I was saying before of like the whole mundane and everyday life. It was just this logical progressions of, well, that this happens and that would cause this happen, which would cause this to happen, and then all of a sudden, you know, that port city is not getting its stuff, so that trade is being cut off, and now people are hungry, and, you know, or more important, they can't get the malt and the barley, so there's no beer, and people are getting angry, and, you know, it's like, yeah.
Revolution!
Yeah.
That's the worst thing that
Right.
happened.
We've got about 20 minutes left in this. I'm going to give about 10 minutes at the end if anyone in the audience wants to ask a question. Before that, let's spend 10 minutes. I've just got a note here that says language, culture, and society.
Oh, God. Yeah.
We got 10 minutes to knock this out.
I just make maps.
Lawrence, would you like to
Language,
kick us
culture,
off?
and what was the third?
And society. If you want to approach any of that, I know this is a gigantic topic.
Okay, so
Cover all of it. Go on.
it's the same topic as we just had because it's history.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right. So you know, if you want your setting to feel real, you go to reality and you look for your analogies there. So you want to have a situation that is going to have dramatic conflict in it. How do people respond to this kind of pressure? How does their culture, you know, teach them how to respond to different kinds of threats, menaces, economic pressures? You look for an analogy in history, and you will see how people reacted to it, and then you just you take that and you spin that in. because that's the truth of how people respond to those kind of pressures, and it's going to feel right because it is right. Culture, history. Look for cultures that embody the kinds of conflicts that you want to have in your stories, and then go and study those cultures and pull stuff out and plug it into your own setting, and use that to inform how your NPCs live, and if your player characters probably come from this world as well, what were the influences on them? What do they think about stuff, right? It comes from the givens of the society and culture in which they grew up. So you need to understand those things, and the best way to understand them, because they're complicated, is to take a historical culture that embodies aspects of what you want to convey, and steal it.
I do see nodding.
I think culture is really, really important. And obviously culture informs society. The language side, I'm a huge fan of everything Middle Earth, and Tolkien just invented this entire world because he loves language, and I think it's and I think he really, really committed to the whole. He found this work and was just translating it to English from all these other things. I think that's the kind of standard which only insane people try to reach. But with culture and society, I think it's really, really interesting. And I think when you're creating worlds and everything, you're going to tend to the things that are important to you. I'm autistic, so for me, it's you don't historically in fantasy you don't tend to find a lot of autistic characters.
I don't know, some of the Catholic saints. Sorry, Saint Francis of Assisi. That guy was definitely on the spectrum.
But so for me, I try to kind of represent that quite a lot, because and obviously it's a little bit difficult in fantasy because you can't say hi, this is the autistic character, and but if it's contemporary, it's a little bit more kind of easy to not code it, for example. But what for me, for world building and creating new worlds in modern times, is to kind of make it reflect. As you keep saying about the mundane makes the fantastical more fantastical.
Yes.
So you want to kind of reflect the kind of things that are in our society now, to let the other magical things breathe. So it would be incorrect, I think, to create stories now, for me as a storyteller, and to ignore the diversity in culture, diversity in sexuality, diversity in religion, diversity in neurodiversity, and so on. Because what you're doing then, and one of the great things, and you would know this from Baldur's Gate 3, with how people attach. Sorry to make you throw your water. How people attach to certain characters because they see something of themselves in these characters, and they see something of themselves in these parts of the world, and everything is so important, because for a long time storytelling is so kept, I suppose is the word, by whoever's writing them, because they have this funneled view of how the world should look like and how their world should be. But what we can do as storytellers and creators is to open the gates and to show people, look, there's space here for people like you, and there's space here for what you want to do, and hopefully to inspire people to not only enjoy the things and to take part in them, but to go and create their own things as well, because to have that confidence that they're being seen and heard in these spaces. So I think culture and society is so important with anything that you're creating, and it needs to be done in a really respectful way, and I think own voice stories are vitally important as well.
Cool. Savage. Let's also keep going down the line.
I suppose for me, in my main game, Fey Earth, it's easy. I didn't have to worry about culture because it's an alternate 19th century Earth, so it's just like 19th century Europe. I didn't have to reinvent anything. But I have played around with ideas of creating a fantasy setting using the same Fey and folklore and all the rest of that. And when I look at doing those kinds of things, going back to the earlier conversation about tropes, I will like, I've got my city or my culture or whatever, like this group of people here, and it's just like, okay, well, what's the geography and the terrain like where they live? Okay, well, it's kind of cold and it's not quite Arctic tundra, but it's really cold. Okay, well, what cultures in our world are from those kind of regions? So you know your Nordic cultures, and it's like, and I'll be like, okay, well, and I'll take maybe, I won't just say, right, they're Finnish, you know, or they're Vikings or whatever, but I do like to then like, I'll take one or two aspects of that culture, like one or two things from it, and then I'll just like use that as a basis to build from, you know? So that then helps me create the identity of them, you know? So if it's like an Arctic cold kind of region, I'll go into that, okay, that Viking warrior archetype, you know, but like there's lots of warrior cultures, so, but you're still working off that as like, or if it's a coastal region with a lot of trade and lots of, I'll say, so there's lots of trade, lots of spices, okay, so they've got great food, so I'm thinking Italians and their obsessions with food, and build a culture around food, you know? So everybody knows, oh, the people from that area, they love their food, they take their cooking really seriously, you know, and that becomes the thing. And you can have a lot of fun then, that you're picking themes that we identify as and we recognize in different cultures that we know of, but the trick is not just copying and, you know, transplanting an entire culture in, because then it's just lazy appropriation. But if you take a few things that are real and exist, then that makes this culture you're making believable and real. Because, oh, I know people like that. I've met people like that. I've gone to countries where people are kind of like that. They're not exactly like that, but they're kind of, and it just gives this air of realism and believability to it then that just makes it seem more organic and more alive.
Yeah. So, Kayt, if we were trying to like visually represent these cultural changes, or any cultural signifiers, how does our foodies, you know, cities or country juxtapose against, I don't know, our Vikings? Talk us through it.
Well, as far as I would, like, if it was something that I was asked to do to make it more Viking-y or whatever, just to kind of look at historical pictures or whatever, just to get an idea of like what kind of furniture, what kind of layout, what kind of, you know, just what it should look like, really, and to go from there.
And stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then especially because there's loads of food on Incarnate, which is great. So the foodie one would be easy,
Yeah.
throwing food everywhere. But on a personal note, I live with Crohn's disease myself. So on every map I make of a building, there is at least one toilet. So everybody is like, there it is, there it is. So, see, I think
Toilets are so often left in.
I know.
They really are.
They're nowhere. And nobody goes to the toilet in the game ever, but unless it's to stab somebody. But yeah, just to try and, like, going back to the autistic thing, and just trying to bring in, you know, like, there are people like me who that is something they think about a lot. And there has to be other people that are like, why is this tavern got no toilets? Every pub has a toilet.
Yeah.
So, like, for personally, that's something that's really, that I would try to put into things a lot.
Absolutely.
Just trying to think like that, trying to think, well, how can I make this a more, and trying to make doors a bit wider as well, just in case somebody has a battle wheelchair or whatever. Just, you know, just trying to, you know,
Absolutely.
make it that anybody can play.
I'd have a sensory room in every tavern.
Yes. That might be my next thing.
Go for a little break.
That might need, add loads of jellyfish.
Right. Fantastic. Thank you very much. I'm going to open up now. I'm going to open up now to the floor to see if anyone has any questions. Throw up a hand. I've got a mic for you, which apparently is working. Way, fantastic. And we got a hand up front right away. Absolutely. Do you want to just, that's just for the recording, it's not going to amplify your voice.
So when it comes to world building and stuff, I've kind of recently enough built my own campaign, my own home world and that kind of stuff. And then I wonder how you deal with when you're building worlds and stuff like that. I had a situation where a particular thing I was doing, which was quite a main part of the arc of the whole story, I then happened to watch another playthrough show online and stuff, and they did something so similar that I literally went, crap, I need to rewrite my whole story now. how would you go about that? Would you go about rewriting it? Would you just push on through and be like, no, this is my idea, or this is how I did it before I even knew about that? How would you adjust that to make it actually work for you now?
It depends. If this is really a key element of your world, keep it, okay? Because it's important to you. And your world has to, you're going to put a lot of energy into building that, right? So it needs to reflect what's important to you. And the more energy that you put into it, the more it's going to be unique rather than similar. You don't want to repeat yourself too much, right? But so if you've done it before, don't do it again, right? But if it's important to you and it's yours, follow through, keep it.
Yeah, I'd be the same way. Batman versus Superman is the exact same storyline as Kong versus Godzilla that came out a couple of years ago. It's exactly the same storyline.
Harry Potter and Star Wars.
But the execution's different, and they go into different things. The characters within the stories are different. So there's going to be so much. There's a thing apparently on Twitter recently about a writer claiming that agents skim. When you submit stories to agents, they take ideas and give them to their authors already. Because some author brought out a book that was similar to their idea that they had. But it just happens. People have the same ideas all the time. It's the execution of it, and as Lawrence was saying, what you're interested in and your energies is going to make it unique enough. So yeah, I wouldn't really worry about it too much.
I'd be like, go even deeper into it. Because it's like, it's not just an event. It's an event that's in your world and is shaping your world. And even if the event was similar in another story, that's in a different world to yours, So the impact of that event on your world is going to be different to what it was in the other story, And I think as long as you tie this thing that's happening into your world and why it's important in your setting and what impact it has in your setting, even if it is on a surface level a similar thing happening, it's going to feel very different to the people who are in your world because they're in your world, they're not over there.
Cool. Thank you very much for your answer, Carl. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Just things that are the same story. Die Hard and Home Alone.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, I see someone else has got a question over this direction. Fantastic. Let me run over here to you now.
I can't remember who said someone said
there you go, sir.
It was like plot and story.
No, I was just wondering, would you have an idea of a character first and build a world around them, or would you have the world first and then build a character in that world?
Was I nodding, was I? Yeah, I come up with characters first, and then I kind of figure out the character, and I figure out the thing that is the most challenging thing for that character, and then I create a world around that. So it's like how to torment the character the most, basically. And then organically grow for that. So say, for example, I come up with a character who is completely like non-religious or something. I'll kind of think of a way of, well, what would be a roadblock to them, and it might be a very religious-based world where, like, that they're in control of the world, basically, or something like that, and kind of work in ways like that, or even down to little small things like what's the character's biggest fear, what is their happiest memory, what is this, build that out, and then just start spreading out from that, and from there you kind of start thinking of other characters as well, then that can service the story and service the character and so on. So yeah, that's how I do it anyway.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have anyone else? Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I don't even have to go anywhere. Fantastic.
So you're a DM, right? And you have lore. How do you get players to engage more with the lore of your world?
You don't?
No, but like as a DM, how do you showcase
it's an optional thing. I mean, look, my job title used to be lore master, all right, on ESO. And let me tell you right now, the lore is, you don't want the tail wagging the dog, Right? So what's important about lore is what matters, what should matter in it to that character, to that player, rather, who's playing that character. If it's relevant to the thing that they're trying to achieve, then they're going to get interested in it and they're going to follow through on it. If it's not, don't make them eat that. They're not hungry for that. They're hungry for stuff that matters to the experience that they're trying to have. The other way to deal with.
I think actually my question was more to the point of how do I actually give that to the players?
Usually, in a video game, it's optional. So there's all these books on the shelf,
right?
And they can read them if they want.
Yeah.
In a tabletop game, that's less likely. So you have to have people who embody the lore that you're going to deliver, and so that when the players go to interact with them, if that lore is important to the character they're talking to, then they're going to weave it into their response. So that's how you're going to deliver it in a personal way, through a character, and by showing that it's important because it's important to them. And then it's not dry and it's not just 3,000 years ago the Maiar did thus and so.
Continue.
I have a few different ways that I do it in my games, and it depends on the type of lore that you're sharing. If it's some historical piece of lore that you've wrote about 3,000 years ago on the Maiar, how you can bring that in is to simply how things that happen in your setting on a functional level, usually on a government level of the country is run like this and these borders are like this, and somebody said, well, why is it like that? I was like, oh, because there was this war 3,000 years ago, and then you can bring it in easily that way of and how you're able to do that is that this thing, this government power or this structure or this border is directly impacting on the players, and it's we can't go over here because we have to, and then they're like, why is it like this, So when you get them to that point of you're creating natural obstacles for them as part of the narrative, they're just going to be asking, why is it like this? This is dumb. And then you have someone say, well, that's because this happened at this time, and as a result, there were these consequences. There's other things you can do, in a previous campaign I was running a Fey Earth. Now, this works better in a later setting, so my early modern period setting was, and it was a bit of work for me as the GM, but I really enjoyed it. But I used to create front pages of the newspaper. And I did it properly with oldie-timey font, and I'd spend hours looking for line drawing illustrations to put in. And it was to drop plot points for my players of stuff that's happening in game in the world. I was dropping plot points of things, So one example, they were hired to go and retrieve this. The explorer an abandoned abbey in Kerry, and it turned out that it was haunted by ghosts of this weird pseudo-Christian cult that had been worshipping the Fey hundreds of years ago and tried to release Crumcrook, and they got the book that they were supposed to get back to their employer, and that led to a whole bunch of other stuff. But then they were like, oh well, this will be auctioned off to collectors, and then a couple of sessions later there was a small little 2-paragraph section. It wasn't even the main article on the front page of auction of Sotheby's in London and listing items that were on it, and the book wasn't there. It wasn't listed. I'm shit, where's it gone then? They said they were, so, but I also was then putting in other stuff to do with my setting of France and Germany are having these stuff and the elves are talking about this. So you're having these other articles in it that you've got this mixture of some of it's direct plot points that you're using as hooks for your players, but then they're also reading about this other cool stuff anyway because they're reading the whole thing, and you're able to then just in an organic way tease it out them. So you can use those kind of devices, and tricks can be a lot of fun, but it can get time consuming.
That was a very interesting answer, thank you.
Yeah, so.
Thank you very much. I'm going to thank all of our panelists. fantastic conversation. My pockets are full. I've stolen a lot. Round of applause, please.